The training grounds of the Sovereign Fleet Academy stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian platform, suspended above the violet clouds of Krell 9. Here, the galaxy's finest military cadets learned the ancient art of synchronized combat maneuvers that had protected the Coalition for 12,000 years. Here, Tivik's Cub Squadron was failing spectacularly. "Formation Delta 7, now," barked Commander Jelks, his 4 eyes narrowing in disappointment as the young Krellian warriors scattered like startled fish instead of converging into the required defensive sphere. Tivik, leading from the front, had tried to compensate for his squad's poor timing by accelerating early. The result was chaos bodies colliding mid-air, anti-grav harnesses tangling, and one unfortunate cub spinning helplessly toward the safety nets below. It was their 14th failed attempt that morning. Jelks's mandibles clicked in frustration. "Worthless. You dishonor your clutches. In my cycles of instruction, I have never witnessed such profound incompetence." He turned away, his ceremonial tail lashing. "1 rotation. You have 1 rotation to show improvement, or this entire squadron will be disbanded and reassigned to waste reclamation duties." The cubs landed in dejected silence. Tivik's blue-scaled face darkened to purple with shame. Around him, his squad, Narek, Shalva, Quinn, and the others looked equally devastated. They had trained for this their entire lives, studied the ancient tactical texts, memorized every formation pattern, but something fundamental was broken in their execution. "We're doomed," muttered Narek, his crest feathers drooping. "My family will exile me." "There must be a way," Tivik insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. "We simply need to practice more. Drill harder. Drilling harder won't help if you're drilling wrong." Every head turned. The voice belonged to Mara Quinn, the human observer who had been sitting quietly at the edge of the training grounds for the past week. She stood now, her short frame somehow commanding attention despite being half the height of the smallest cub. Her brown hair was tied back, and those strange, forward-facing predator eyes studied them with an intensity that made Tivik's scales prickle. Earthborn. The word carried weight in the fleet. Humans had only joined the Coalition 2 generations ago, but their military tactics had already begun reshaping strategic doctrine. Some called them geniuses. Others called them dangerously unpredictable. "With respect, Observer Quinn," Tivik said carefully, "we have been training in the traditional Krellian methods for your whole lives, I know," Mara interrupted, walking toward them. "And that's your problem. You're trying to execute a formation designed for mature Krellian warriors with fully developed neural synchronization. You cubs don't have that yet. Your reaction times are faster, but your instinctive coordination is still developing." Tivik's mouth opened, then closed. No one had ever explained it that way before. "The ancient formations assume capabilities you don't possess yet," Mara continued. She pulled out a small holographic projector. "But humans? We never had neural synchronization. We had to develop tactical formations based on different principles: communication, trust, and adaptability." She activated the projector. Instead of the rigid geometric perfection of Krellian formations, it showed something organic, almost chaotic. Human soldiers moving in loose, flowing patterns that somehow maintained cohesion. "This is insane," whispered Shalva. "There's no structure. No mathematical precision." "Exactly," Mara grinned, an expression that showed teeth in a way that reminded everyone present that humans were persistence predators from a death world. "You're trying to be perfect. Perfect formation, perfect timing, perfect execution. But combat isn't perfect. The enemy doesn't care about your geometry." She looked directly at Tivik. "Your squad has potential. I've watched you. You move fast. You're brave. And you genuinely care about each other. But you're so busy trying to execute the drill perfectly that you forget why the drill exists to keep each other alive." Tivik felt something shift in his understanding. "So, what do you suggest?" "Do it my way," Mara said simply. "Give me 1 rotation. Let me teach you human-style tactical movement. If it doesn't work, you'll fail anyway. But if it does, She smiled again. Well, let's surprise your commander. The cubs exchanged glances. It was heresy, abandoning the ancient Krellian methods. But they were already facing disbandment. Show us, Tivik decided. What followed was the strangest training session of their lives. Mara didn't start with formations at all. She started with games, human games. Tag, she called it, where one person chased the others. Then, capture the flag, a territorial exercise. Then something called dodgeball, that involved throwing soft spheres at each other. This is juvenile, protested Quinn. This is building instincts, Mara corrected. You need to learn to read each other's movements without thinking about it. Stop overthinking and start feeling where your teammates are. Gradually, she introduced tactical concepts, not rigid formations, but principles. Maintain mutual support distance. Keep visual contact with at least 2 squad mates. Never leave anyone isolated. Communicate constantly. When Tivik moved, he learned to call it out. When Shalva saw a threat angle, she signaled immediately. You're not trying to be a perfect geometric shape, Mara explained. You're trying to be a living organism that adapts. If someone falls behind, you adjust. If the enemy comes from an unexpected angle, you flow around them. Trust each other more than you trust the formation. As the rotation wore on, something remarkable happened. The cubs began moving with a fluid coordination that felt nothing like the rigid Krellian drills, but somehow worked. They weren't synchronized through neural links, they were synchronized through mutual awareness and trust. Again, Tivik called out, and they ran the exercise again. This time, when Narek stumbled, Quinn was already there to cover his position without being told. When Shalva called out a simulated threat, the entire squad flowed around it like water around a stone. They were ready. Commander Jelks returned exactly 1 rotation later, his expression already set for disappointment. Very well, cubs. Demonstrate formation Delta 7. I expect this will be your final. Commander, Tivik interrupted another breach of protocol. Permission to demonstrate an alternative tactical approach? Jelks's mandibles twitched. Alternative. There are no alternatives to 12,000 years of proven. He noticed Mara Quinn standing beside the cubs, and his eyes narrowed. The Earthborn has been teaching you. Yes, Commander, Tivik said firmly, and we request permission to demonstrate. For a long moment, Jelks said nothing. Then, proceed. This should be educational. Educational. Jelks said nothing. The cubs took position. To Jelks's eyes, their formation looked wrong immediately, too loose, too informal, lacking the precise spacing of proper Krellian doctrine. He prepared to call a halt to this embarrassment. Then Tivik signaled, and they moved. It was like nothing Jelks had ever seen. The cubs flowed across the training ground in a pattern that seemed almost random but maintained perfect mutual support. When he activated the first combat drone, a simple threat, they didn't try to form a defensive sphere. Instead, they scattered, each cub covering a different angle. Communications rapid and constant. Jelks increased the difficulty, adding more drones, creating chaotic threat patterns. The cubs adapted instantly. When Narek's anti-grav harness actually did malfunction, a genuine equipment failure, the squad didn't break formation. Quinn and Shalva converged, created a protective pocket, and extracted him from the danger zone, while the others maintained defensive coverage. It was improvised. It was chaotic. It violated every principle of traditional Krellian tactics. It was brilliant. Jelks shut down the simulation. The cubs landed, breathing hard but unscathed, every one of them. In the silence that followed, the commander slowly approached Tivik. That was not formation Delta 7, he said quietly. No, Commander, Tivik agreed. That was not any Krellian formation. No, Commander. Jelks's 4 eyes studied each cub in turn, then fixed on Mara Quinn. The human met his gaze steadily, unflinching. Finally, Jelks's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. That was exceptional. He turned back to Tivik. Explain your methodology. As Tivik described, the human approach emphasizing adaptation over perfection, trust over synchronization. Jelks listened intently. When the cub finished, the commander was silent for a long moment. 12,000 years, he said softly. We have taught the same formations, the same methods. We assumed our way was the only way. He looked at Mara. Perhaps this is why the coalition needed the Earthborn. Not to replace our traditions, but to remind us that survival requires evolution. He turned back to the cubs, drawing himself to full height. Squadron Tivik, you are hereby cleared for advanced tactical training. Furthermore, I am recommending you for early graduation honors. His eyes glinted. And I am assigning Observer Quinn as your permanent tactical advisor. Let us see what other ancient assumptions she can demolish. As Zelks strode away, the cubs erupted in celebration. Their earlier shame forgotten. Tivik approached Mara, extending his clawed hand in the human gesture of respect she had taught them. Thank you, he said simply. You saved us. Mara clasped his hand firmly. No, Tivik, you saved yourselves. I just showed you that there's more than one way to succeed. She grinned. Besides, wait until I teach you human close-quarters combat techniques. That's when things get really interesting. Above them, the violet clouds of Krell 9 swirled in endless patterns, sometimes structured, sometimes chaotic, but always moving, always adapting, always alive, just like the warriors who would one day defend them.